Welcome, my friends. This channel is a place where real stories come alive of family sacrifice, heartbreak, and the quiet revenge that life sometimes delivers. If you've ever given your all for someone only to be cast aside, you'll understand the journey we're about to take. I invite you to subscribe and stay with me until the end because these stories are not just mine, they might be yours too. Title: I gave my life savings for my daughter's wedding and she cut me off. I was 58 years old the night my heart cracked in two. The hall smelled of roses and wine, the kind of place you only see in bridal magazines. Crystal chandeliers rained down golden light over tables covered in silk cloth, polished silverware, and champagne towers that shimmered like glass castles. It was beautiful, too beautiful for a man like me. I stood near the back in my old navy suit, the one I had kept pressed for years, just in case. My shoes carried the faint scars of work boots polished as best as I could. I felt out of place, a grease-stained mechanic dropped into a palace. But I told myself it didn't matter. Tonight was about her. Emily, my daughter. My only child. I remembered the day she was born, how tiny she looked wrapped in that hospital blanket, how I promised her mother before she passed that I'd give Emily the life she deserved. And for nearly 3 decades, I worked until my hands blistered and my back screamed, piling away dollars into a savings account meant for her future. That savings, 30 years of oil-stained paychecks, skipped meals, second-hand clothes, was what I gave her. A check big enough to cover the kind of wedding she wanted, the kind of wedding she said she dreamed about. I told myself it would be worth it just to see her happy. But when she walked down the aisle that night, her arm tucked tightly around David's, her smile radiant beneath the veil, she didn't even look at me. Not once. Her eyes skimmed the crowd, her smile never faltering, but when they came near me, she shifted away. Almost as if she didn't want anyone to know who I was. Later, when the vows were done and the music swelled, I tried to step closer to say how proud I was. She brushed past me, her perfume sharp in the air, her hand resting on David's arm, as if I were just another guest. She gave me the kind of nod you'd give a stranger. That was the moment it struck me. I had given her my life savings, everything I had left in this world. And in return, my daughter turned her back as if I didn't belong in her story anymore. I stood frozen in the glow of that chandelier, the applause still echoing in the hall, realizing that sometimes the heaviest silence comes from the ones you love most. I wasn't born with much, and I never asked for much either. For 30 years, I've been over engines in a small garage on the edge of town. The air always smelled of gasoline. My hands were never clean, no matter how much I scrubbed. My knuckles carried scars from slipping wrenches, my back stiff from years of lifting parts too heavy for one man. That shop was my life. 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I worked through summers so hot the concrete burned through my boots and winters so cold the oil turned thick like honey. I missed birthdays. I missed barbecues. I missed the easy parts of life because every dollar mattered. Every paycheck that crossed my hands, I set aside a little for Emily. Her college, her future, her wedding. I remember slipping $5 bills into a jar when she was little. The jar sat in the cabinet above the fridge. She once asked me, "Dad, why don't you ever buy yourself new shoes?" I laughed. Told her shoes don't matter. Someday you'll understand. That jar became a savings account. That account grew slowly, like drops of water filling a bucket. And by the time Emily turned 28, it had become my life's treasure. Not for me. Never for me. For her. Always for her. Sometimes, when the nights were quiet and the garage was closed, I would open the bank statement and stare at the numbers. Pride swelled in me even though I lived in a house with a leaking roof, even though my truck rattled like it was begging for mercy. I thought at least she won't have to struggle like I did. I worked so she could dream. And when she told me she was getting married, I thought, this is it. This is what all those years were for. So I took that account. Everything in it. Decades of oil grease and missed holidays. And I signed it over to my daughter. When she held that check in her hand, I felt like I had kept my promise. I thought she'd see me, not the stains on my jacket. I thought she'd understand, at least for one moment, just how much I loved her. But love, I would learn, doesn't always come back the way you give it. The first time I met David's parents, I knew I didn't belong. They lived in a house that looked like something from a movie. White pillars in the front, a lawn trimmed so sharp it could have been cut with scissors, the driveway big enough to park 10 cars. I pulled up in my old Ford pickup, its muffler rattling the paint, faded from too many winters. I saw the look on their faces as I stepped out, that half smile people wear when they don't want to show the truth. David's father wore a suit even on a Sunday afternoon. His mother held a wine glass like it was part of her hand. They shook mine politely, but their eyes moved over me like I was an oil stain on their carpet. Emily stood between us, her hands clasped, her voice bright. Dad, this is the family. The people who've made David the man he is. She didn't say it, but I heard the rest. The family she wanted me to measure up to. At dinner, I tried to join the conversation. They spoke about stock portfolios, about summering in Martha's Vineyard, about art shows in New York. I nodded, smiled, and stayed quiet. What did I have to say? That I once rebuilt a transmission blindfolded, that I knew how to stretch $20 to last a week. Emily barely looked my way. She laughed at David's father's jokes, touched David's hand as if the world outside their wealth didn't exist. And every time I opened my mouth, she cut me off. Dad, let's not get into that right now. Or, oh, Dad's just being silly. It stung, like sandpaper against the heart. When dessert came, I excused myself to the restroom. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the lines on my face. My tie too short, my shirt collar fraying. I looked like a man out of time, out of place. That night as I drove home, the truck rattled under me. I stared at my hands on the wheel. Grease still lived under my nails, no matter how hard I scrubbed. And for the first time in my life, I wondered, was my daughter ashamed of me? It was a Tuesday night when Emily called. Her voice was sweet, almost too sweet. Dad, she said, there's just one thing. The wedding. It's bigger than we thought. David's parents are covering a lot, but well, we could use a little extra. A little extra. That's how she put it. I asked how much. Silence on the other end. Then her voice dropped. 50,000. Just to make sure everything is perfect. I remember the number echoing in my head like a hammer. 50,000. To her, it was just another detail. To me, it was everything. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the stack of bills, the leaking faucet dripping into the sink, the cracks in the ceiling. My savings account sat like a ghost in the corner of my mind. I had been holding on to it for 30 years. It was supposed to be for her future, for emergencies, maybe even for me when I was too old to work. But now it was for this. I couldn't sleep. I paced the house. My boots thudded against the floorboards that I had nailed down myself. Every corner of that house reminded me of sacrifice. Of Maria, my late wife, urging me to save a little more for Emily. Of nights I ate cold beans while my daughter had a hot meal. At 3 a.m, I sat down, opened my checkbook. My hands trembled. The pen felt heavy, heavier than any wrench I had ever held. $50,000. I wrote the number, then signed my name. And as the ink dried, I felt something in me slip away. The next day, I drove to Emily's apartment. She opened the door, her eyes lighting up when she saw the check. She hugged me quickly, her perfume strong, her arms already pulling away before mine could close around her. Thanks, Dad, she said, smiling. You won't regret this. But even then, even in that moment, something inside me whispered that I would. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, the check stub still lying there, staring up at me like an open wound. My pen marks roughed the ink smudged from the sweat of my hand. $50,000 gone. 30 years of saving. Signed away in one motion. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though it was already past midnight. The steam curled upward, and I thought about Maria. Her laughter used to fill this kitchen. She'd sit across from me, her hand over mine, reminding me that every sacrifice was worth it if Emily had a better life. I whispered into the silence. I hope you were right, Maria. I stood up, walked the creaking floorboards of the house I'd patched and repaired 100 times. The walls carried the echoes of Emily's childhood, her footsteps running down the hallway, her voice asking me to check for monsters under the bed. And tomorrow, she would be a bride. I pulled out the old photo album. There she was at 6 years old, wearing a paper crown, smiling with missing teeth. There she was at 16, holding her first set of car keys, the used sedan I had bought with 3 months overtime. And now tomorrow, she'd walk into a new life. A life I thought I was still part of. I pressed the photo to my chest, closed my eyes, tried to believe that giving her everything I had was the right thing. That she'd look at me on that wedding day and see not just a mechanic in an old suit, but her father. I turned off the lamp. The darkness settled heavy, and for the first time in a long time I prayed. The morning came faster than I expected. I slipped into my old navy suit, brushed off the dust, polished my shoes until the leather still showed its cracks. I looked in the mirror, a mechanic in borrowed dignity. The hall was breathtaking. White roses lined the aisle. Strings of fairy lights shimmered like stars caught in a net. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their bows dancing across violins. Guests filled the pews dressed in designer suits, silk dresses, diamonds that caught the light. I found my seat in the back. Second row from the end. Not the front. Not where a father should sit. I told myself it didn't matter, as long as she was happy. Then the music shifted. The doors opened. Emily appeared. My Emily. She floated in her gown, glowing her veil, brushing the floor. Her smile lit the room like sunshine. For a moment my chest swelled with pride, but her arm was linked tightly with David's father. Not mine. The guests rose. Applause filled the air. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the pew so hard my knuckles turned white. She walked past me, her perfume drifting like a memory. Her eyes met mine just for a second. Cold. Empty. Then gone. The ceremony blurred. Vows, rings, laughter. I watched from a distance, my heart beating against the cage of my ribs. Each word of love they spoke to each other was another reminder of the silence between us. At the reception, I wandered the edge of the room. Tables glittered with champagne. Waiters carried trays I couldn't pronounce. David's family laughed in clusters. I stood alone. Someone asked me if I was with the staff. I smiled faintly and said nothing. And as Emily twirled under the lights, her new family cheering, I realized I was already being erased. After the ceremony, the photographer called everyone to the front. "Family pictures?" he shouted, cheerful, commanding. I stepped forward. My chest swelled. This was it. My chance to stand by my daughter, to hold my place, to be seen. Emily stood in the middle, David beside her, his parents on the other side. They glowed like royalty. Perfect posture. Perfect smiles. I moved toward her, just a step away. Then I felt a hand on my arm. One of the ushers leaned in. "Sir, maybe stand over here." He guided me to the far edge, the very end of the line, half in the frame, half out. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. The photographer lifted his camera. "Closer together, please," he said. Everyone shifted inward except toward me. The gap stayed. My body hung on the border as if I were someone's distant uncle. Say cheese, click. Emily didn't look at me once. She laughed at something David whispered. Her hand rested proudly on his father's arm. Click. Another shot. Another memory. One where I was barely visible. I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't move. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it over the shutter. Afterward, as the guests moved on, I lingered, staring at the spot where I had stood, a father reduced to the corner of a photograph. I thought of all the pictures we had taken before. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, Emily sitting on my lap, frosting on her cheek. Back then I was the center of her world. Now I was fading out of her frame. The reception grew louder as the night went on. Laughter spilled over the music. Glasses clinked. The dance floor filled. I stood near the back, nursing a glass of water, watching. waiting for a moment with Emily that never came. That's when I heard them. Two women at the next table, dressed in satin, diamonds flashing under the lights. Who is that man in the old suit? One whispered. The father, I think, the other replied. Her voice lowered, but not enough. Doesn't look it. More like hired help. They both laughed softly, covering their mouths with painted nails. I turned away, pretending not to hear, but the words lodged in me like splinters. Later, as I passed another group, I caught more. Can you believe she came from that? David could have done better. Their voices blurred with the music, but the tone, the judgment cut clear as glass. I wanted to shout, to tell them every dollar in this wedding hall carried my sweat, my years, my sacrifices. But the words stayed trapped in my chest. Instead, I walked outside. The night air was cool, the stars sharp against the dark. I leaned against the brick wall, pulling in slow breaths, trying to steady myself. Inside, they were dancing, toasting, living in the glow of wealth. And outside, I stood alone. The music reached me through the windows, muffled but cruel. Every laugh felt like it was meant for me. Every cheer was another reminder I was a stranger at my own daughter's wedding. The night was nearly over. Guests were gathering coats. The band played its last song. I stood near the doorway waiting. Just one moment. Just one word from her. That was all I wanted. Emily stepped out from the crowd. Her dress shimmered under the chandelier. She laughed with David, her hand resting easily in his. For a second I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who ran to me when she scraped her knee, who whispered secrets before bed. I gathered my courage, stepped forward. Emily, I said softly. She turned. Her smile faded. Oh, Dad. The word hung heavy. I just wanted to tell you. My throat tightened. You looked beautiful tonight. Your mother would have been proud. Her eyes darted toward David, then back to me. Thanks, she said quickly. Her voice clipped, almost formal. I tried again. Maybe we could have dinner sometime. Just us. Catch up. She hesitated, then shook her head. Dad, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Things are different. Different. That single word cut deeper than any knife. David placed his arm around her shoulders, guiding her away. Come on 'em. They're waiting for us. She gave me a polite nod, the same nod you'd give a stranger holding the door. Then she turned her gown sweeping across the floor and walked away. I stood frozen, my hands trembling, my chest hollow. The hall emptied. The lights dimmed. Chairs were stacked, glasses cleared. And still I stood there waiting for her to turn back. She never did. The highway stretched empty that night. Just me, my old Ford, and the sound of tires humming against the asphalt. The tuxedoed guests were still clinking glasses somewhere, but I was already miles away. Alone. The dashboard light glowed faint green. I could see my own hands gripping the wheel. Calloused. Scarred. Black grease still etched deep into my nails, no matter how much I scrubbed. I thought about the money. 30 years of it. Gone in a blink. I thought about Maria. How she wanted Emily to have everything we never did. And how I had promised. I had kept that promise. But what had it given me every mile home? The questions piled higher. Was it worth it? Was love measured by dollars or by the years I gave up so she could rise higher? The night air slipped through the cracked window. It smelled of damp fields of gasoline. Familiar. Comforting in a way the wedding hall never was. A red light stopped me at an empty intersection. Across the street, I saw a young father buckling his little girl into a car seat. She laughed. He kissed her forehead. They drove off, taillights glowing against the dark. I gripped the wheel tighter. My throat burned. My chest ached. That used to be me. That used to be Emily. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered weakly. The paint on the siding was peeling. The house sagged under years of repairs I never could afford. I shut off the engine. The silence wrapped around me like a shroud. In that silence, One truth rang louder than any vow spoken at that wedding. I had given everything. And still, I was left with nothing. The sun crept through the blinds, slicing the room into pale stripes. I hadn't slept much. My jacket was still tossed over the chair, the smell of roses and champagne clinging faintly to the fabric. The house felt emptier than usual, like it knew what had happened. I brewed a pot of coffee. The old machine hissed, groaned, sputtered, same as me. I carried the mug to the kitchen table and sat in silence. Across from me lay the photo album, the one Maria made years ago. Leather-worn corners fraying. I pulled it close. First page, Emily's first birthday. Frosting on her cheeks, eyes wide with delight. Second page, her first bike training wheels crooked, my hand steadying her from behind. Third page, her high school graduation. Her cap too big, her smile wide. She had thrown her arms around me that day and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you, Dad." I traced the edges of the photos with my finger. My chest tightened. When did that little girl vanish? When did she become someone who couldn't look me in the eye? The phone buzzed on the counter. I rushed to grab it. Maybe Emily. Maybe she wanted to thank me. Maybe she had realized. It wasn't her, just the bank. A reminder about my mortgage payment. I set the phone down harder than I meant to. The silence after the buzz felt heavier than before. I looked around the kitchen, the cracked tiles, the leaky faucet, the peeling paint. All the things I had put off fixing, because her life always came first. Now she had a new life, a new family, a new father figure standing proudly at her side. And me, I was just a man sitting in a quiet house, a man whose daughter had cut him out of the picture. Monday came like it always did. Engines waiting, oil stains on the floor, the smell of rubber and gasoline thick in the air. I pulled on my coveralls, the ones with my name patch, Max threadbare at the edges. The same routine I'd lived for decades. But that morning everything felt heavier. The wrench in my hand, the weight in my chest. I leaned over the hood of a car, trying to lose myself in the rhythm. Loosen, tighten, replace, repeat. Work had always been my refuge. Machines didn't lie. They didn't betray. If something was broken, you could fix it. But some things couldn't be fixed. "Hey, Max." It was Tony the kid who worked part-time after school. He was 19, full of energy, grease smudged across his cheek. "You look beat." "Rough weekend," I forced a chuckle. "Something like that." He didn't push, just nodded and went back to sweeping. But I caught the glance. The way he looked at me, like he knew something inside me had cracked. By noon, the sun blazed through the garage door. Sweat trickled down my neck. I paused, wiping my hands on a rag, and saw my reflection in the dusty window. The man staring back looked older, more worn, eyes sunken, shoulders bent. I thought about the wedding again, the whispers, the photographs, Emily's cold nod. My hands trembled. The wrench slipped, clanging against the concrete. The sound rang through the garage like a gunshot. I knelt to pick it up, but for a moment I just stayed there, on my knees, head low, breathing heavy. Machines I could fix, engines I could rebuild, but my daughter's love that I couldn't repair. That evening I sat on the porch. The wood creaked under my chair. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and barbecue from somewhere down the street. I thought I was alone, but then I heard her voice. "Max, it was Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor of 20 years. A widow, kind eyes, always brought cookies at Christmas." She leaned on the fence, smiling. "I heard Emily got married this weekend," she said warmly. "How was it? Must have been beautiful." Her words hit me like a blow. My throat tightened. My fingers gripped the armrest until my knuckles whitened. For a second, I considered lying, telling her it was perfect, that my daughter danced with me, that I gave her away with pride. But the truth clawed at my chest. It was something I said slowly. My voice cracked. She tilted her head. "You don't sound too happy." I looked down at my boots. Scuffed. Dusty. Not the shoes of a father of the bride. She walked down the aisle holding another man's arm. I whispered, "Her husband's father. Not me. I barely existed." Silence fell. Even the crickets seemed to pause. Mrs. Henderson's smile faded. Her hand gripped the fence. "Oh, Max," I forced a laugh, brittle sharp. "Funny, isn't it, 30 years of saving? I gave her everything. My life savings. And in the end, I couldn't even stand beside her." Her eyes shone, but she didn't speak. Maybe because there was nothing to say. I looked up at the sky, the stars faint behind city lights. My chest ached with a dull, heavy weight. "She used to call me her hero," I murmured. "Now I'm just the man she avoids." Mrs. Henderson finally whispered, "I'm so sorry." I nodded, but the words did nothing. Sorry couldn't fill the empty chair beside me. Sorry couldn't bring back my daughter. A few days later, I sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop. The screen flickered. The fan whirred. I logged into Facebook. Just a habit. Something to fill the silence. And there it was. Emily's wedding album. 100 photos. Each one brighter than the last. The smiles. The flowers. The glittering lights. I clicked through slowly, my heart pounding harder with each picture. Emily and David kissing under the arch. Emily laughing with her bridesmaids. Emily holding hands with David's parents. Photo after photo. Family gathered tight. Laughter caught in still frames. But me, I wasn't there. The one group photo I remembered, the one where I stood at the edge, was online. Cropped. Tight. My shoulder cut out, as if I had never stood there at all. I leaned closer to the screen. My chest burned. My throat closed. I searched every picture, every angle, every smile, but not once did her father appear. Maria's face flashed in my memory. Her whisper in the hospital years ago, "Promise me you'll always be there for Emily." I kept that promise. Every day of my life. And now she had erased me with the click of a mouse. The comments stung just as much. Beautiful family, perfect wedding. Such proud parents. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed through the kitchen. I sat in the dark, fists clenched, heart pounding. A father erased. Not dead. Not gone. Just unwanted. The house was dark that night. Only the hum of the fridge. Only the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I sat at the table, hands pressed against my face. My chest felt hollow. My eyes burned. For days I had drowned in sorrow. But sorrow has a way of changing. It rots into something else. Anger. I replayed the wedding in my head. Her hand on another man's arm. The whispers. The way she looked past me as if I were a stranger. And now the photos. Cropped. Erased. Deleted. My jaw clenched. My teeth ground together. 30 years of grease. 30 years of sacrifice. The house I patched. The food I skipped. The dreams I buried. All for her. And she had cut me out like I was nothing. I stood suddenly, the chair scraping back across the floor. My heart hammered. My fists tightened. If she thought she could erase me, she was wrong. If David's family thought they could replace me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I walked to the mantel. Maria's photo sat there, her smile gentle, her eyes kind. "I'm sorry, Maria," I whispered, "but I can't stay quiet anymore. They've taken enough." The sorrow cracked. The anger poured out. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt alive. Not as a broken father, but as a man ready to take back his dignity. The next morning, I didn't go to the garage. I didn't touch a wrench. Didn't even step into my truck. Instead, I pulled out an old box from the closet. A box I had avoided for years. Inside, bank statements, receipts, checks, stubs. Proof. Every dollar I had poured into Emily's life. I spread them across the kitchen table. The table groaned under the weight of 30 years of sacrifice. Here was the tuition check for college. Here were the car payments when she couldn't afford gas. Here was the loan I took against my own house so she could start fresh. Every line of ink was a memory, every dollar a piece of my flesh. I stacked the wedding expenses on top. $50,000. The last of my savings. The final insult. My hands trembled, but not from weakness, from fury. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was just an old man in a cheap suit. They forgot I built everything she stood on. I pulled out a notebook, began to write. Dates, amounts, stories. The years I missed Christmas because I worked double shifts. The vacations I never took so she could have new shoes. The meals I skipped so she could eat. The paper filled quickly, my pen racing like fire. By the time the sun dipped low, the kitchen table looked like a battlefield. Receipts, memories, evidence. They wanted to erase me, but I was going to remind them, not with shouting, not with begging, with truth. Cold, hard, undeniable. And when I revealed it, the whole world would see exactly who I was. I didn't shout. I didn't storm their house. Instead, I started small. At the diner downtown, I slid an envelope across the counter to an old friend. Inside, copies of the receipts. Proof of the tuition, the car, the wedding. "Max, what's this?" he asked. "Truth," I said simply. Later, I visited the church. Spoke to Pastor Allen. He had watched Emily grow up, baptized her as a baby. I laid the documents on his desk one by one. He leaned back slowly, his eyes wide. "All these years it was you." I nodded. And yet I was left outside. Word spread faster than I thought. Neighbors whispered. Friends who had seen me as quiet and humble now saw the sacrifice written in black and white. At the grocery store, two women spoke just loud enough for me to hear. "Did you know Max paid for all of it, and she pretends like he's nobody?" The tide was turning. One evening, Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door again. She held a printed photo from Facebook. The wedding group shot the one where I had been cropped out. "They erased you," she said, her voice trembling with anger. I met her eyes. Not for long. I could feel it now. The balance shifting. Every whisper, every murmur of truth was like a crack in the perfect glass world Emily had built. And when the crack spread far enough, the whole thing would shatter. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. Hard, sharp, angry. I opened the door. Emily stood there, David beside her, his arms crossed, her eyes blazing. "Dad," she snapped. "What are you doing?" I kept my voice steady. "What do you mean, don't play games?" David cut in, his tone smug. "People are talking. They're saying you paid for everything. The tuition, the wedding, even the house. You're making us look like what I asked quietly." I stepped aside, letting the silence stretch. "Ungrateful, that's not me making you look that way. That's the truth." Emily's lips trembled. For a second, I saw the little girl inside her. But then her chin lifted hard and cold. "You had no right to go around telling people. What happens in our family is private." I almost laughed. "Private," I said, my voice low. "You made it public the moment you erased me. The moment you let me stand outside while another man walked you down that aisle." Her face flushed. She turned to David for backup. He sneered. "You're a pathetic old man, living in the past. You think a few dollars makes you important? You're nothing? Always have been." I stepped closer, close enough to see his smug grin fade. "I built everything you stand on," I said. My voice steady, sharp. "The roof over your head, the life you're so proud of. And you dare call me nothing?" Emily's eyes darted between us. Her voice cracked. "Dad, please, stop this. You're only embarrassing yourself." I shook my head. "No, Emily. I stopped being embarrassed the day you cut me out of your life. Now I'm just getting started." They stood frozen, the silence thick. Finally, David pulled her arm. "Let's go. He's not worth it." They stormed off. The door slammed. But I didn't feel small this time. For the first time in years, I felt tall. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where I had eaten alone, where I had cried, where I had gathered the receipts. Only now the table looked different. It wasn't a place of sorrow anymore. It was a war room. I spread the papers out in neat stacks. Tuition, mortgage payments, wedding costs. Every sacrifice lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. And I had orders. Christmas was coming. The Jenkins family reunion. Dozens of relatives, friends, neighbors, all under one roof. Emily and David would be there, smiling, pretending, playing the perfect couple. That was where I would strike. Not with fists, not with shouting, but with truth. I rehearsed in my mind. The look on David's smug face when the numbers hit the table. The silence when everyone realized the fairy tale was built on my back. For years I had been erased, cropped out, ignored. Now I would be undeniable. I pulled Maria's photo close, her smile calm, steady. "I'm doing this for us," I whispered. "For the years we gave. For the love that deserved respect." I packed the documents into a leather briefcase, clicked it shut. The sound echoed through the house like a promise. This time, when I walked into that room, I wouldn't be the forgotten father. I would be the reckoning. The house glowed from the street. Christmas lights twinkled across the roof. Laughter spilled out through the frosted windows. I parked across the road, sat for a moment in the dark. The briefcase rested on the passenger seat, heavy, waiting. I breathed in, out, my hands steady now. No more trembling. When I stepped inside, warmth and perfume wrapped around me. Voices buzzed, the clink of glasses, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies. Emily was by the fireplace, wrapped in satin, her smile polished for the crowd. David stood tall beside her, his hand on her back like a claim. His parents hovered near, chatting loudly about business and vacations. And then there was silence. Because I had walked in. Heads turned. Eyes shifted. Whispers rose. Emily's smile faltered. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I looked at her. Then, at the crowd. My voice calm. "I came to celebrate family." Her jaw tightened. David stepped forward, his tone sharp. "This isn't the place for you." But I was already moving. Straight to the dining table. Long, polished, glowing with candles. I set the briefcase down. The metal latch clicked open. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. Papers spread across the table, receipts, checks, bank slips, photos. The truth laid bare under the candlelight. Gasps. Murmurs. People leaning closer. "What is all this?" someone whispered. I straightened my shoulders, looked each of them in the eye. "This," I said slowly, "is what it costs to raise a daughter. To give her everything. Her education. Her home. Even this wedding." I turned to Emily, her face pale, lips trembling. "And this is what it cost me to be erased." The room froze. No one moved. The fire crackled. A glass slipped from someone's hand. And in that moment, the reckoning had begun. I held up the first paper. Tuition. 4 years. $48,000. Paid in full. I dropped it on the table. The paper slapped like a verdict. Whispers rippled through the room. Eyes darted toward Emily. Next, I pulled out a receipt. First car. Down payment. $2,000. Insurance every month until she could stand on her own. Except she never had to. I set it down. Another slap. My hands moved faster now. My voice steady, growing stronger. The wedding dress. $5,000. The flowers. 10. The venue. 35. Each number cut deeper. Each page stacked higher. David's face darkened. His fists clenched at his sides. "Stop this, old man," he hissed. "You're humiliating yourself." I turned to him, holding his gaze. "No, I'm humiliating you, because the only thing you built in this world is on my back." Gasps. Murmurs, louder now. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others stared with wide eyes, unable to look away. Emily's lips quivered. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. I pulled out the final paper. My hand didn't shake. My life savings, $50,000. Everything I had, given to you, Emily, for this day, for this perfect image you wanted to show the world. I set it down. The stack towered between us. Proof, unmovable. And what did I get in return? I let the question hang. My voice dropped lower. I was left outside. I was erased from the photos. I was replaced by another man. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. An old aunt at the table whispered, "Is it true?" A cousin muttered, "My God." I looked at my daughter one last time. Her face was pale, her eyes wet, but she said nothing. The truth was already louder than her silence. The room was silent. No music, no laughter, just the crackle of the fire and the weight of every eye on Emily and David. I pushed the last paper forward. The pile stood tall. That, I said slowly, is the measure of a father's love. Years of sacrifice. Years of giving. I turned to Emily. Her shoulders shook. Her eyes glistened wide and desperate. "But love," I whispered, "wasn't enough for you." She opened her mouth. No words came. I looked at David. His jaw clenched, his face red with fury. "You called me nothing. A nobody. Remember this moment, David, because now every person in this room knows who built your world. And it wasn't you." Gasps. A murmur swept across the table. Heads shaking. Eyes narrowing. David's mother covered her mouth with her hand. His father scowled, shifting in his chair. Even their polished masks were cracking. I closed the briefcase slowly. The click of the latch echoed through the hall. Then I straightened, shoulders back, head high. I was never asking for thanks, only respect. But since you couldn't give it, you'll live with the truth instead. I turned toward the door. My boots echoed on the hardwood. No one stopped me. No one dared. As I reached the threshold, I paused. Looked back one final time. "Remember this night," I said, my voice firm, "because it's the last one where I'll ever beg for a place in your life." And then I walked out. The cold air hit my face. Sharp. Clean. Free. Behind me, voices rose, questions, accusations, arguments. Their perfect image collapsing in real time. I didn't need to see it. I didn't need to hear it. My revenge was complete. Not with rage. Not with violence. But with truth. And the truth was louder than anything they could hide. 3 days later, I sat on the same porch where I'd once wept. But this time it felt different. The winter sun shone weakly, but it was enough. The air smelled of pine, fresh and sharp. My breath lingered in the cold, steady, unbroken. Word had spread fast. Neighbors talked. Family whispered. Friends called. Emily and David's perfect image was gone. I didn't need to add more. The truth was already doing the work for me. For the first time in years, the phone rang, not with demands, not with guilt, but with kindness. Old friends checking in. Mrs. Henderson bringing soup to my door. Even Pastor Allen stopped by, sitting with me for an hour in silence. No judgment, just presence. I looked at the old house across the street. A young father tossed a football with his boy. Laughter rang out, echoing across the block. It hurt, but it also healed. Because I realized something that night. Walking out of that house family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about who shows up. It's about who still sees you when the world tries to erase you. I reached for Maria's photo on the table beside me. Her smile steady, eternal. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "I gave everything for Emily. But now I'm finally keeping something for myself." The wind rustled the trees. For the first time in years, I felt light. Free. They thought they had broken me. But the truth set me free. And freedom, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. A week later, I packed a small bag. Just clothes. A few tools. Maria's photo wrapped carefully in a scarf. I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. My sister Rosa had called after hearing the story. Her voice cracked over the phone. Max, come spend the weekend with us. The kids miss their uncle. We'll make room. So I drove. Past the town. Past the streets that carried too many memories. Out to the hills, where Rosa lived in a modest house, with a red porch swing and wind chimes that sang with every breeze. When I pulled into the driveway, the door swung open. Children's laughter spilled out wild and free. Rosa hugged me tight like she was pulling back all the years I had lost. That night, we sat around her table. It wasn't polished oak. It wasn't covered in fine silver. Just mismatched plates, steaming bowls of stew and bread fresh from the oven. But for the first time in a long time, I felt at home. The kids begged me for stories. Rosa poured wine. The air was warm, alive with laughter. No whispers. No shame. No erasing. And when one of the little ones climbed into my lap and said, "You're the best, Uncle Max," my chest ached, but in the sweetest way. I finally understood. Revenge gave me justice. But love, real love, gave me peace. I looked around that small, crowded kitchen and smiled. This was family. And I would never beg for it again.